Welcome to Old Classic Car, and here my own highlights from this year's NEC Restoration Show, or to give it its full title, the Practical Classics Classic Car and Restoration Show with Discovery Plus 2023. And to begin with, in a fantastic sort of diorama here, we've got this excellent Facel Vega HK 500. What a bit of kit that is. Absolutely wonderful car to see that. It was just fantastic. I did think about doing a walk around video, but with all the general noise and hubbub and so on, the crowds, I thought this was probably the best way to handle this particular video. So, next up, XDA 400. You can always rely on the Frisky Club stand to have some interesting cars, and here we've got XDA 400, the Meadows Frisky Sprint of 1958. What a great car that is. It looks like something out of the Jetsons almost, the old TV series. And as always at the Restoration Show, you have plenty of classic cars in pieces, restoration projects, barn finds, cars being worked on. And that's the case here with this Jowett Javelin. Looks like a very original car. Engine out, front end off. Very advanced car for its day, built in Yorkshire. Clearly a bit of a work in progress there. Next up, a restored vehicle now. A couple of classic Citroens. There's a Light 15 in the background there, which we'll get a better view of later in this video. And an H-van, a 1965 Citroen H-van in the foreground there. I do like those, they're great. Next up, over on the Austin Counties Car Club stand, we've got this Austin A70 Hereford. A bit like a grown-up A40 Somerset, very similar looking, slightly different grills at the front and those oval intakes on the scuttle there, just near to the rear edge of the bonnet. But yeah, a bit of a project there for someone. Will it ever get restored? Who knows? Now here's one that's mid-restoration, a Jowett Bradford. Clearly a lot of work gone on with this one. Everything's in prime up, still a bit to do, but great to see another one being saved. I really do enjoy the restoration show at the NEC. There's always so many interesting cars. I was able to get in quite early doors, so it did get busier as the show progressed. And there's a Morris Ital up in the air. This belongs to a young lady that used to be on TV in a very popular TV series. I think you'll probably know the one I mean. But yeah, that's a rare survivor now. There's some really good seat covers in that one as well, the tiger print seat covers. Now we're on the Ford Corsair Owners Club stand, celebrating 60 years of the Ford Corsair. And we've got various examples here. I couldn't get them all in frame, but there's a four-door car there, pale blue car, engine out. Clearly lots of work going on with that one. And on the left, a black pickup. Someone had converted that one into a pickup many years ago. And I do always like this stand as well. There's always some interesting stuff here. This is a Zuck, a Polish-built Zuck from 1987. These were built from 58 through to 1998 and were based on the FSO, apparently. But yeah, I don't think I've ever seen one of those before. But yeah, great to see these oddball cars. Another oddball here, but from slightly closer to home, the Austin A90 Atlantic, here in drop head coupe form. I mean, any A90 is a rare sight, but a drop head is particularly unusual. And there's two in this particular video. I do like the screens, a three-piece windscreen on these. If you've ever thought about restoring a Morris Minor Traveller, this is probably what you'll end up being faced with. New wood kit there, mid-installation on this particular Traveller, but that's a lot of work. You see so many of these up for sale, failed restorations where people have dismantled all the wood and then given up, and I'm not surprised because it's a daunting old job. Now, the first of several cars in the auction area at the NEC this year, one of two 1965 Jensen CV8, a bit of work to do there, mainly fiberglass bodied, although the doors are skinned in aluminium, but what a great car that is. Huge Chrysler V8 engine under that bonnet. Now this was in the pride of ownership area, one of several cars. There's an A90 in the background there, and in the foreground a very shiny, immaculate BMW 5 Series, one of the E28 series cars, this one from 1985. What a beauty that is. Next up, we're over to one of the Porsche Club stands, and this was probably one of the most active stands at the entire show. We've got a 928 here in many pieces, and a much later in the line 11 just on the right hand side there, and that was in a state of much disassembly. There were so many cars there. I mean, I took over 880 photographs, and here we are in the barn find section, an Austin or a Morris van. Like I say, 880 plus photographs, and I had to whittle them down to just over 200 for this particular compilation. Apologies if I didn't feature your car if you were exhibiting. Please let me know in the comments if your car was there but isn't in this video. I apologise, I just couldn't include everything. Right, DXL 261, lovely pre-war car. This is an Armstrong Siddeley dating to 1935, and what a beautiful looking car that is. Always good to see the pre-war cars out and about. I just think some of them are really, really stunning to look at. And back to Corsairs, but not on the Corsair Owners Club stand, I don't think this one. This is an F plate, so that would have been registered in late 1967 or early 1968. Another four-door pale blue Ford Corsair. I did think about doing a compilation video just on Corsairs sometimes. If I can get enough photos together, I will do that. I've got an MGA, a fixed head coupe MGA here. It's a really nice one, very distinctive registration number on this one, XKA9 on the Norwich Classic Vehicle Club stand. Many club stands at this particular event, and it's incredible the efforts that people to go to all the displays and so on. It really is really impressive. Also impressive was this 886 XVB, a Renault Dauphine from 1958. Clearly some modifications been going on there. It's a right-hand drive car, so I'm wondering if that's a bit like our 4CV, maybe assembled at the Renault factory at Acton perhaps. And at the entrance to the show at the NEC this year was this immaculate Ford Anglia 105E. Carry on at this year's restoration show at the NEC. Following on from this Anglia 105E, we've got another classic Ford, an unregistered Mark I Ford Granada GL with just 129 miles on the clock. I mean, clearly it's suffered a little bit in storage, looking at the rods on the roof there, but yeah, what an incredible car that is. Probably delivery and test mileage only, but wonder what the story is with that one. Now this was a fascinating vehicle. Two photos of this one. The 7.2 litre twin-engined Ballard Special. It says, I think this was a fairly recent build, and it features two Ford Model A engines. I'm not quite sure how they're coupled together, but we'll have a photo of the engine installation. There we go. There are two Ford Model A engines. Now, a standard Model A engine is 3.3 litres, same as was fitted into my old Model AA truck. Quite how they're joined together, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure there'll be plenty of information around online if you search for the Ballard Special, but yeah, great to see that. And here, a Wolseley Hornet, one of the Crayford converted cars for the Heinz competition, where they were given away as prizes back in the 1960s. You can just see in the foreground there on the right hand side, just a windscreen of an immaculate example, but here I thought I'd focus on a very much a work in progress restoration project. Back in the auction area, back to vintage times, sort of 1920s, mid to late 1920s, a Morris Cowley, a bullnose Morris Cowley Tourer. That's a lovely car, that is. That's really, really smart indeed. I do like that a lot. Over to the standard club stand. Of course, I was going to find myself there at some point. And we've got 863 UYY, a standard Vanguard Vignale, which was the sort of the Vignale modified or fettled version of the Phase 3 Vanguard. This car was registered in June of 1960. That's a standard 2088cc engine. Here's an interesting one, FBA 50. If you look up that registration number on Google Images, you'll find a car that looks very different to this. I'm not quite sure what the story is, but this is obviously an Allard-based special. That registration dates to 1950. You can see the A on the grille there. So I wonder what the story is with this particular car. Like I say, I was scooting around quite early at the show before it got busy when I took these photographs. Right, TGU 120L is a Jensen Healey, one of the Lotus-powered Jensen Healeys. This is a roadster or convertible with hardtop. You don't often see them with the hardtops on, so that's quite nice to see. And here we find our way over to a Rover P6, a grey Rover P6. Now this one is a 1971 2000 automatic. I like the bonnet prop. Like I say, there was a lot of background noise at the show, so doing a walk around may not have worked all that well. Okay, KKH 980D. It's a 1966 Volvo P1800S. Very nice pale blue colour, same colour I think as the 544 that we used to run a few years ago. A much missed car that was, and it's always great to see these old Volvos on show. Now here's one I've seen before at the NEC, a Fiat 127 Sport. That's a very bonny example in bright orange. Many classic Fiats there this year, and I think there'll be a few more of them featuring later in this video. Back to the auction area, and I think I saw a couple of Mark 1 Transits, one I featured in last year's video, but there was this drop side pickup in the auction area. That's quite a rare old girl, that is. I'm assuming it's a petrol engine with that front end, the diesel, and a slightly longer snout if memory serves, but yeah, that's a very straight little pickup truck. Lots of French cars as well. I did have a good look around there. We've got a Simca 1000 here, a little four-door saloon. Don't see too many Simcas in this country now. When we did our little visit to France towards the end of 2022, we did spot a fantastic old Simca on the side of the road. If you've not seen that road trip video, please check that one out. Sometimes the skylights in the NEC cause some interesting effects, and here we've got a rear view of a Alfa Romeo Junior GT, I think it's a 1300 Junior GVO 294K, so that's a 71 car I think, but yeah, the spotlight was very much on that very original looking Alfa there. Back to Jowett now, and we have the Jowett Jupiter RTD 111. There's a registration of that particular car, and there's that Javelin in the background being worked on, the restoration project. And I'm assuming this Jupiter has been through the similar process itself. It was in immaculate condition. I was quite tempted with this Ford Consul Mark 1 TTN 314 when I was growing up as a kid. The next door neighbour, he had a white one. He used to brush paint it quite regularly and sort of goes roaring up and down the road in his column change 4-cylinder Consul, and this car brought back memories of that car. Now, back to the French area, and we have this lovely 2CV based van in a very eye-catching colour there. Peter Cook's Bread. So as with many of these old commercials they use for promotional purposes now, what a great rolling advertisement these are for any small business. Great stuff. Over to the Saab Owners Club of Great Britain Limited, as it says on the gazebo at the back there. We've got a K-Reg 1971 Saab 99. Many of these basic cars, or more routine regular road cars, are overshadowed by the later 99 turbos, but these were a good solid car, very comfortable too. And what an incredible vehicle. This is a GMC V8 car transporter. I'm not quite sure what this one went for, but that was in the auction area. What a great bit of kit that is. And you can just see in the background an old American fire engine. We'll have a proper look at that later on in this video. Classic Toyota time now, SMD 60S, an old Toyota Celica GT. Another neighbour of ours had one of these in silver, a brand new car. They lived opposite to us. He had a Toyota Crown Super Saloon, I think a 2.6 litre, huge thing, and then he bought this. Okay, PUD 920 is an Armstrong Siddeley up in the air, up on axle stands there. Bit of another work in progress, as so many of the cars that are on display are at this particular event. And this is an Armstrong Siddeley Star Sapphire with a slightly shorter grille. The Sapphire has the taller grille. Quite a gaggle of Hillman Avengers now, and we've got one here, bonnet raised. Is this one of the sporty ones? It's not the Tiger, but yeah, that's a really smart one. I'm assuming that's a fairly plush one with the metallic paint and the vinyl roof. That must be one of the plusher versions, I would imagine. Good old standard again. We've got a very dusty, barn fresh looking standard 8. It's quite an early one with a slidey door windows front and rear. The very early cars didn't even have hubcaps, so this one isn't one of the very first, but it's certainly quite an early example, a bit earlier than ours. Ours has wind-up windows, all the luxuries. Austin Healey's now, fantastic pair of Austin Healey's here, but in the foreground we've got an Austin Healey 3000, a two-tone 3000. Lovely car, louvered bonnet, and an Austin Healey 100 alongside it with that very low rakish windscreen. Back to the pride of ownership area, and there's a Mini on the right hand side there of course, and the Metro you can just see in the background, but in the foreground a Mark II Escort Sport. That's on an R plate, so we know that this was registered in about 76 or early 1977, up to July 1977 our reg ran for. This is on the Ford Side Valve Owners Club stand. There's some interesting cars there, and we've got a rear view here of the Ford 100e Escort, the estate car version of the Ford 100e, but based on the Thames 300e body shell, but with different rear doors. The van had side hinge doors, and that has a split tailgate. And here we have a good old Austin A35, a two-door car in mid-restoration clearly. As you can see, it's partially stripped down, bit of work been going on the front wings there. And there's that A70 Hereford just in the background there. A very rusty car, but really interesting to see. Another one up on ramps, as so many cars here at the NEC were. A Jensen Interceptor here on an N registration, 1974 or 1975. You can just see a part restored, stripped down version just in the background there. I think we'll get a proper look at that one later in this video. Like I say, if you would prefer me to have done a walk around video, let me know in the comments, because it's always good to know what you think. Okay, DEM 160X, that's an Audi 100 CS version, a 2-litre car, and this one was registered in 1981. Next up we have this classic Triumph, a Triumph Stag, showing off its original 3-litre V8 engine. It's not often that you see these on chrome wire wheels either, not more often than not. They have the steel wheels with the trims, or the Mark IIs came with alley wheels as standard, if I remember correctly. But yeah, lovely car that is. And here we have what appears to be a fairly rare Morgan. It's a flat rad Morgan, as you can see. It hasn't got the usual curved cowl at the front, and it looks like a drop-head coupe as opposed to a more commonly found Tourer, with a proper roof there. But yeah, that's a very smart car. Very original paint on this one. It looked like it either an older restoration or just well preserved. And here, one of several Rovers, 200s and 400 series cars that are on display at the NEC this year. This one is a G-plater, so 1989 or early 1990, I think. But yeah, gathering in popularity these are. You're starting to see more and more of these in the later facelifted cars at shows. And here, an XJS. This is a 3.6 litre car with the AJ6 engine under the bonnet, and this is the XJSC. This was sort of the halfway house open top version before they released the full convertible version of the Jaguar XJS, an example of which you can see alongside there. There's always a good turnout of classic Fords as well at the NEC Restoration Show, and this is a Mark V Ford Cortina. That's on a W plate, so that would have come out in probably late 1980 or thereabouts. And alongside it is a Ford Probe, much later Ford, but again, it's a disappearing sight. You don't see them too often. Okay, and another Fiat 127, a bit of a project here, a little bit of rust on the front. So clearly it's quite an original survivor car, this one. All the wheels are off, maybe the brakes are being done. You can see disc brakes on the front there. Is that original, or would these have been on drums originally? Maybe you know and can let me know in the comments. Okay, classic Vauxhall. I do like that shade of metallic green. That's a really handsome looking car. And that is an FE series Victor, if I'm correct. You can see a Rover P6 in the background as well. Like I say, this was fairly early doors on the Saturday of this 3-door show, so I was able to scoot around before it got too busy. And here, 118HYV, one of the Y series saloons, post-war Y series MG saloons. And this is a beautiful example. It looks very similar to the YB that we've seen at various shows, such as the WEM Vehicles of Interest show, and also Smallwood. Is it the same car? I must check the registration number. Okay, on the Midland Austin 7 Club stand here, it's just quite close to the entrance. Lovely little Austin 7 box saloon there, DY7627. And a part-built special alongside. You can see the sort of the space frame outlining the shape of the bodywork that is planned for that car. So that's going to be quite an eye-catching car. Quite a few Triumph TRs, of course. This is a TR register stand, and a very standard-looking bright red Triumph TR6 there. 2.5 litre engine, fuel injected, Lucas fuel injection. You can see the setup under the bonnet there, so that's quite a grunty car. The running gear of that was lifted from the earlier TR5. Now EGC 422H, that's one of the Pagoda roof Mercedes-Benz SLs. Again, this was on the pride of ownership stand. There's all sorts of very immaculate cars. Made me feel pretty bad about my own cars when you see just the incredible condition that some of these cars are in. There's a gorgeous 2-door coupe alongside as well. And talking of immaculate cars, we have a metallic red MG Magnet here on a very red carpet. It's not always great photographing red cars against red carpets or blue cars against blue carpets, but sometimes at these indoor shows you can't really help it, so you're always a bit compromised when you're photographing things. Back to another old Fiat from the 1970s, and one of 2 or 3 Fiat X19s that I saw at the NEC Restoration Show this year, 2023. The NEC, if you're not from around these parts, is the National Exhibition Centre near Birmingham, and there are several classic car events throughout the year. Now this was a bit of a poster car for me when I was growing up in the sort of mid-1980s, if you like. This is a 1984 Saab 900 Turbo 16S. And I always like these silver ones with the black body parts, the extra skirts on the bottom of the doors there. Those 3-piece alley wheels, the 3-spoke alley wheels, they just look fantastic. Got another classic Rover here. This is a maroon P6, but not any old Rover P6. This is a 2000 TC that was the Earl's Court Motor Show car in 1964. And that makes it a very rare survivor indeed. And there's a nice white 3500S and later P6 alongside. And talking of 3.5 litre Rover P6s, we've got a much disassembled 3500S here, minus engine. This would have the manual gearbox bolted onto the back of its V8 engine. You can see the sort of module, if you like, construction. You can unbolt the roof panel there, as you can see. All the doors, the wings and everything unbolt as well. And the replacement for the P6 was this, the Rover SD1. This is a V-registered car from 1979. And yeah, it was quite an advanced looking car, but technically I think the earlier P6 was the more advanced mechanically. Okay, and staying with green for a moment, we have a Singer Chamois, one of the slightly updated or uprated rather versions of the Hillman Imp. The later Chamois had twin headlights either side, I believe, and this is an earlier one with just a single lamp, so had very much more the Hillman Imp look to it. But yeah, lovely little car indeed. And this is an unusual one, EBM 705T, the Vauxhall Cavalier Mark I Sports Hatch, or fastback. And of course that body shell would be used on the Opel Manta as well. But this is probably the rarer version, the Vauxhall Cavalier. And yeah, very nice pop-up glass sunroof as well. Back to the Fiat, and we've got a Fiat Uno Turbo IE here. This is a G-plater from about 1989. This is one of the, I think, is this the facelifted version of the earlier car, or did they call these the Mark II perhaps? I'm not quite sure. And there's a Punto alongside. Yeah, these cars are getting rarer all the time. MG 7011 now. It looks pre-war, but this is an MGTC, registered in July of 1946. Very much a pre-war style car, but they were reintroduced and the TC was launched just after World War II, but you can clearly see the pre-war origins of that car. And only 5 or so years newer than that MGTC is this very eye-catching car. This was in the barn find area at the Restoration Show this year, and it's a glorious, about 1951 or thereabouts, 4-door Chevrolet. What a great old girl that is. Plenty of work for someone there, but it could be oily ragged. And looking very, very shiny and well restored is this Lancia Beta. These didn't survive in huge numbers at all, thanks to the rampant rot that these cars and most 1970s cars suffered with, so it's amazing really that any cars of that decade have survived in my view. Clearly this one's had a cosseted life. Now to Japan and the Toyota stand, and we have here a Celica convertible HNF 337Y. That's an unusual car, you don't see too many of those. That one dates to about 1982. There's a rally prepared Celica alongside it. Another pre-war car and another pre-war Armstrong Siddeley KMP 700. That's a 16 horse car from 1939. 4-door saloon, 6-light bodywork, i.e. 3 windows down either side. Very lofty roof line, so designed for people with hats, I imagine. And a slightly smaller car, but also pre-war, is this lovely little thing. This is the VP4380, a Triumph Super 7 Royal Coupe, fabric-bodied car, and this was built in 1928. I do like that a lot. What a cute little car. Whether I'll actually get in it or not, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, over to the Volvo stand again. There's a 144 in the background there, which you may have seen in earlier videos that I've done at classic car meets more local to us, but in the foreground here, 240 Estate. That's F registration car, so that will be 1988. I remember my uncle having a couple of 240s back in the day. Now, we've got an Opel Manta here. Now, usually I see these badged up as GTEs, but this is badged as a GSI, so maybe you can let me know what the difference is. Behind it is one of the earlier Opel Mantas, the A-type, I think they were called. But yeah, what's the Manta GSI? Now, this was nice. This is one of the first cars I saw as I went into the halls on the Saturday morning. Boo 8 is the registration. This is a 1962 Shelby Cobra, the 260 cubic inch. It's quite an early Mark 1. This featured in Viva Las Vegas, a film with Elvis. Chassis number CSX2038. Now here, this is an unusual looking MGB. This is a recreation of a prototype Aston Martin. Back in the day, there were thoughts of Aston Martin having a version of the MGB. It had the O series engine as opposed to the usual B series, a much taller windscreen, body mouldings and different front bumper, etc. But that came to nothing. Now, a VW Beetle, not the best photo in the world, I'm afraid. OFL 49 is a registration, and it is a 1949 build, registered in 1950 example. That's a lovely car, that is. But yeah, sorry about it being photographed against a black floor and a black screen on the background, but you know, indoor photos aren't always great. Right, anyway, over back to the Austin Counties stand, and there's a restored A70 on the right hand side there, next to the rusty one we saw before. But this is what really caught my eye, this J40 pedal car. I bet a few of you watching this had J40s back in the day, or longed to own one. Let me know if you had one of those. As I mentioned in the Crew Heritage video only a couple of weeks ago, this year is an anniversary to 40 years of the Maestro, the Austin Maestro, and this is a 1984 B-registered MG Maestro on those very distinctive alley wheels. A lovely car, that is. Really good condition this one was, and a rare car now. We've seen one of these before, and here is another example of the post-war MG Y Series saloon. I'm not quite sure if those headlamps are original. Maybe you can let me know. Something different. Maybe it's just the painted shells that are throwing me out a little bit. But yeah, these are great little cars. And the body shell is based on that of a contemporary Morris. Part restored here now, we have an Austin A30, a two-door saloon. No door handles on this one, no door glass either. So it's in the middle of being restored, but it looks like it's going to come out a lovely looking little car, this is. Cream or off-white with a black roof, that's a great colour combination. Modern wheels, and so on. And this left-hand drive car on the Saab stand is a lovely little two-stroke Saab here. Very nice indeed. One time I rescued and found a bullnose van. There is a separate video on the channel from a couple of years ago all about that, so if you like your old Saabs, please hunt down that video when you're finished here. And here's that Citroen Traction that we saw earlier on just in the background. It's a blue car, obviously, 948 XUU, and clearly again a work in progress. Like I say, it's always great to see these part dismantled cars. It gives you a real idea of how these cars were put together, rather than just seeing rows and rows of shiny cars. It's great to see a few dusty ones. Now, this is a rare thing. This is the TR7 Tracer, like a shooting brake or version of the Triumph TR7. This was bodied by Crayford. That conversion was done by Crayford. I think it was, I don't know how many of these were made, but very few, maybe just a one-off even. I do like my old Volvos, and I spotted this black 122S from afar and had to go and have a closer look at this one. That's an incredible looking car, beautifully turned out. Black is a very hard colour to get looking right. It shows any wrinkles in the bodywork, but this one looked fantastic. Many louvers in the bonnet as well, so I wonder what's going on under the bonnet of that car. Now, here's an interesting car. I don't know quite what the story is with this. The registration is 303 LBL. Now, is this a period race car, or is it a car that has been made to look like a period 1950s racing MG? Perhaps you can fill me in the comments if you know the answer to that question. Back to Austin's again, and we've got a cracking little van here. I don't think those wheels are factory fit, and the grille has been opened up a little. Some of the slats have been cut away to increase cooling, so maybe there's a modified engine lurking under the bonnet of that particular Austin. But yeah, I do like those. Quite a few Sunbeam Alpines on display this year as well. You can just see one in the background, and in the foreground we've got the Tiger. That's got the 260 cubic inch engine, the V8, same size as the early Mark 1 AC Cobra that we saw before. But yeah, that must be a lot of fun. Bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, perhaps. There aren't too many giveaways of what's hiding under the bonnet. Now, over on the Rolls-Royce Club stand, we've got this sectioned Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. I'm not quite sure why this particular car met this fate, but it's quite interesting just to see how various parts of the car work. You see the doors have been cut away to show how the electric motors work, and so on. And back to old Simp, because like I say, check out that road trip video we did in France towards the end of 2022 if you like your old Simcas and old French cars in general, as I do. But I mean, this was lovely. This was on a J registration, metallic blue. What an eye-catching little car this Simca is. I do like that, and it's right-hand drive as well. Now, here we have an MG Metro. This isn't one of the earlier cars. You can just see an earlier MG Metro sneaking in on the right-hand side there with those pepper pot type alley wheels. And this is one of the later cars. It's on a G plate, so that puts it at about 1989, bright red, and so on. Now, VMT 384M, another Hillman Imp. I do like that one. That looks like a very clean looking car from 1973. These were assembled up in Scotland, up at Linwood at the factory up there, and then brought back down for final finishing. Yeah, a great car. Rear engine, of course, a bit like our Renault. And a very dusty Alfa Romeo Spider is next. And the registration of this one, if you want to look up any details on it, is G233TAG. It's a right-hand drive car as well. Most of these I've seen are left-hand drive, I think. And here, a complete gaggle, or maybe a squadron of Messerschmitt bubble cars. Happy birthday 70, it says there. And yeah, there's quite a lineup. We've got a couple of restored examples, and a dismembered one a little bit further away from the camera. You can just see the Frisky stand in the background as well. But yeah, I do like the few micro cars. And here we've got a vintage Jowett. This is an interesting little car. KW989 is the registration of this one. It was registered all the way back in March of 1927, a 748cc engine. Yeah, I love that. Nice 2-gallon petrol can on the running board as well. And here is that car that we saw in the background a little earlier. I photographed the blue Jensen in the background there, and this is the restoration project that you could just see sneaking into the background. All in primer, part dismantled. Wonder when this one will see the road again. Clearly a lot of work has gone into this. The effort that goes into restoring any of these cars is just incredible. And here we go back to the Frisky stand. We've got a Frisky Sport here, 705 AOW. What a neat little car that is. And there's another one up on stands there being restored, so clearly these things are still being found in people's garages and sheds up and down the land, so that's great to see. Here we have an imported XK120 fixed head coupe, very similar to the car that a mate of mine is restoring at the moment. If you like mammoth restoration projects, check out that XK120 video that I put up a little while ago. This one's on very bright chrome wheels, chrome wire wheels. Talking of bright shiny cars, we've got an immaculate MGB LE, one of the limited edition MGB Roadsters. This is quite a late example, this one, but still with the B series engine and twin carburetors that you can see under the bonnet there. Almost halfway through this particular NEC collection, and we've got a Heinkel there. Heinkel bubble car looks like it needs a little bit of TLC. That's lived a life, that one has, but maybe next year we'll see it restored on the same stand, who knows. Quite often you go 1 year and you'll see a car in pieces, then the next year you'll see it all restored, and that's great that people are taking on these projects. Now look at this, a very early Mini. What an interesting thing this is, with the add-on boot extension. This was created by LMB Components Limited of Guildford. Now, is that the same LMB that used to produce Ford Pop suspension parts, independent front suspension parts in the 1950s? I'm guessing it probably is, but please let me know. Now, back to the Austin counties. This was a real treat to see this. I was really pleased to see this. I used to run an A40 Devon, a 1949 Devon, quite a few years ago, and this is an Australian-bodied A40 two-door Tourer. Quite a few of these were made in Australia, and this one's been shipped over in more recent times, right-hand drive, but yeah, a rare car. And look at this is rare. This was a real treat. I was really taken with this little NSU Prinz Sport Coupe. What an eye-catching car that is in silver. You can see the independent rear suspension just tucked under gently at the back there, and plenty of camber on that one. And there's a rear three-quarter view of the same F-registered 1967 or early 1968 car. But yeah, what a stylish little car that is. That was a real Bobby Dazzler. But what I like about the restoration show are all the restoration projects and barn finds that you see there. Those are what really grabbed my eye. And this is a Vandenplas 4-litre R, the ultimate evolution, I suppose, if you like, of the big Farinas of the 1960s. That's a Rolls-Royce developed engine under the bonnet. It never went into a Rolls-Royce car, but it was their engine. Now, this normally would have been a Simca, but in later years they were badged up as Talbots, but this is rare. This is a pickup version. I think this must be a factory-built version of the little Talbot, or the Simca as it was. It's a right-hand drive car though, so I'd be interested to know where this one's been. Has it always been in this country? Who knows? Right, several Stimpsons were available on the Owners Club stand, but this is the one that really caught my eye, this six-wheeler. The six-wheeler Safari 6, it says on that little sign at the front there. I've got a feeling I saw this one at Gaydon a few years ago at the British Motor Museum. But yeah, amazing. And look at this oily ragger, and we've got a 542 XVM. That is a 1956 Chevrolet, a four-door Chevrolet. I like that Notec lamp. I'm not so keen on LED headlamps in old cars, I just don't think they sit right, but the old Notec lamp on the front there, the blue spot, is great. I like that. Ooh, Rovers now, P2s, these are very swish cars indeed, and this is the Rover 12 Tourer. Registration is KKM12 for people who like that kind of thing. Original registrations, that's always good to see. This one was registered back in February 1948. Here we've got a well-used Opel Monza GSE. These aren't too common now, I don't recognise those wheels. But clearly this is a very well used, enjoyed car. Maybe it's set for a little bit of restoration before too long, but yeah, that's clearly had a good blast down the M6 and the M42 down to the NEC. Now this is one that I really liked. This takes me back to the 1990s. This is an XJ12 Series 1 short wheelbase car with a 5.3 litre V12 engine. That engine first appeared in the E-Type Series 3 and it was then dropped into the XJ. Lovely Rover here with headlamp peaks, which I'm not so sure about, but yeah, that's a lovely cream Rover 95 P4. Every now and again I wonder whether I should be buying one of these, because that looks like a very usable car indeed. Unfortunately, prices haven't gone too silly on these particular cars. Real quality car. It is an oddball one, I like this, K863RLK. I do like anything that's a bit unusual. This is a Skoda Favorit Estate. And when did you last see one of these? Yeah, it's great to see that. Anything that's a bit more unusual, a bit different to the norm, that gets my vote. AON 962K is a really nicely turned out MG midget now. So the K plate tells us that this was registered sometime between August 1971 and July 1972. It's got square arches. Some of the earlier cars had the round arches for a time before they reverted to the more squarer rear arches of that car. Now, maybe you could tell me what this is. Obviously it's an Allard of some description, but I didn't notice any information about it, so what is this? I'm not quite sure. It's clearly a lot of work done and plenty still to do, and it's just a really interesting eye-catching car, but if you know what that is, please let me know. Okay, we had the MGTC before, which was just parked to the left out of shot, and alongside that was this red MGTD, which was the TC's replacement. And also being worked on down at the NEC, we've got ODY842, which helpfully, according to that information board at the top there, is a 1960 Elva Courier Ford Water Trophy that was entered in down at Goodwood. That information board would have been used in the pit area at the Goodwood Revival. There was like a few Roots Group cars as well, and here we've got a Hillman Minx on a C plate, so that is from 1965. Okay, back to a classic French car for a moment. There's a Renault 8 in the background, looks like a Gordini, and in the foreground is a Renault 17 Coupe. What a rare car in this country. I don't know about in France, but in the UK, that is a very rare sight indeed. And again, oddball thing, so that certainly gets my vote. And you don't see too many of these either. This is a 3 Series BMW with a Bauer convertible conversion. That's the E21 series BMW. 3 Series, and yeah, before BMW offered their own open-top versions of the 3 Series, Bauer in Germany offered their own conversions. Wow, now look at this mighty machine in the auction area, an Airstream RV, or recreational vehicle, very appropriate registration number on the front of this American RV. But yeah, what an incredible thing that is. Nice old Humber here. This is the Humber Scepter, based on the old Roots Group Arrow series cars, the Hillman Minx and the Hillman Hunter were the cheaper versions, but at the top of the tree was this, the Humber Scepter. Now, all the way from Australia is this, the Leyland P76, but not any old P76. This apparently is the Targa Florio edition, named after the famous road race in Sicily. That is a Michelotti design. Michelotti, of course, was best known perhaps in the UK for penning the Herald and the Spitfire. But yeah, an incredible car. Now, something pre-war. This is an overhead valve engine 1074cc Rover 9 Tourer. That'll be nice when it's finished as well. I'm not sure of the year of this one, but probably late 1920s. The early Rovers had that very distinctive radiator shape. There are quite a few self-build cars at the NEC this year as well, and here we've got the Midas. We've got a trio of Midas cars here. I think these were mini-based, if memory serves. Now this is a lovely little pre-war car. This is an MG 1880 Tourer. There is a green one that appears locally at several VSCC and old car events in our area, but I hadn't seen this cream car before. But that's a lovely, lovely pre-war. Can you just imagine driving to the pub on a nice summer's evening in that car? This is a rarity. This is an E83W, a Ford 1000 weight van, but with a very special body. That's not the factory body. Those doors and that roof and the rear body is not Ford bodywork. This is like it said it was almost like a compressed hardboard that it was built from, so that's a very unusual survivor indeed. And the P6 being worked on here, front suspension off on this particular car. Of course, these were designed originally with gas turbine propulsion in mind, but that never happened beyond a few prototypes, and just the regular 4-cylinder and V8 engines found their way under the P6's bonnet in the end. Wow, now there's quite a few Heinkel 3-wheelers on display, but also on the club stand was WXW 859, a Heinkel Tourist. This particular machine was registered in April of 1959, and what an original looking vehicle that is. It's not been taxed for quite a few years. Back to the barn finds, and there was this really interesting little Mini. Clearly many modifications, a flip up front on this one, and by all accounts had a bit of a racing history, maybe a bit of club racing history back in the 1960s. But yeah, that was a really interesting little car indeed. Always one or two commercial vehicles dotted around the NEC as well, and we've seen this one before. This is an Austin/Morris badged BMC J4 panel van on an L plate, so about 72 or 1973 is the date of this one. Originally they were sold as Austin or Morris, and then things gradually became combined. Now, S749TWA, we're back in the pride of ownership area, and that is a really beautifully turned out Mini. What a cracker that is. Let me know in the comments which of these cars are the ones you'd be bringing home if you could. Now we've got DKW 506, an MG VA Tourer. A very swish and very rare car that is now. Many of the smaller MGTCs and such like survived the little two-seaters, but these larger Tourers are much thinner on the ground. And these are disappearing too, the early examples of the Austin Metro. Okay, we'll carry on with this look at some of the cars that were on show at this year's NEC Restoration Show. We're over on the Morris register stand. We've got a side view here of a 4-door Morris 8 Series 1 saloon. Bonnet raised, showing off its little 918, I think, cc engine. Little side valve 4-cylinder engine under the bonnet of that particular car. Hydraulic brakes, so it's quite an advanced little spec for the day. Another Hillman Imp here. This one's up in the air, the rear bonnet is off. You can see the lift up rear hatch on these particular cars. A very smart, recently restored Morris Minor. This one's on an F plate, so sometime between August 67 and July 1968 for this particular two-door saloon. Really nice example, this one. The later Minors had those silver painted wheels as well, like this car. Those early ones were cream. Right, PO8849. We do like a barn fine looking car. This is a Wolseley, registered early 1934. It's got a 2.1 litre engine under its bonnet. Very nice car indeed. Real quality bit of kit. You can see the illuminated badge in the middle of the radiator there. So you could always tell when the Wolseley was driving towards you at night. Okay, on a G plate now, we've got a Triumph Vitesse convertible. Clearly it's had a few modifications, the wheels, the paint, the grille, rollover bar, seats and so on. These cars do lend themselves to modifying, and this one has certainly seen that treatment. Back to the Morris stand, we've got DKB 507. Quite a rare Morris 8 van. What a useful little vehicle that is. Again, ideal for promoting a small business. Next up, we have a Sunbeam Talbot Lotus. This is a W Reg car, 1980. Really popular in rallying, rear wheel drive of course, Lotus powered. Yeah, a very useful bit of kit in historic rallying today, and popular back in the day. But of course they were rendered fairly obsolete when the four-wheel drive Quattros came along. Now back to pride of ownership, we've got EDC 208C. Now this was a beautiful looking car. Mercedes-Benz 220 SE two-door coupe. Such a quality car, beautifully made. And this is a nice one too. We've got a, well, is this a Bedford Beagle based camper? I think it was the Beagle. That was the Beagle was the estate car version of the Bedford HA van, and I think this camper conversion is based on a Beagle, but I could be wrong. Let me know if I am. I think that's what we're looking at here. But rare car. HAE 797K, another example of a Hillman Imp. This one's on very non-standard wheels, but looks very purposeful. Great little car, and an interesting alternative to a Mini. Would you prefer a Mini or would you prefer a Hillman Imp? Let me know. I've never been in an Imp, I must confess. I've been in Minis and driven Minis, but I've never driven a Hillman Imp. And as I mentioned before, in the auction area, there were quite a few restoration projects, cars that needed restoring, and there were two CV8s. This is the other one. We saw the other one before, and this was the second example. I'm not quite sure what these sold for. The estimates were around about £3,000 or thereabouts, so clearly worth a lot more when restored, but a long way from being in restored condition. Now this was nice, very much in restored condition. ERW 736C, a Datsun Fair Lady Roadster. Occasionally we see one of those at local events, but not in this condition. This was a beautifully turned out example. Another XJ, this is a Series 1, but this is one of the 6-cylinder cars, the XJ6 with the 2.8 litre engine. The Series 1s, you had the option of the 2.8 or the 4.2 version of the XK 6-cylinder engine, and the V12 came along in 1972, but the Series 1 XJ came out in 1968. Another old Volvo here, huge bumpers, so I'm guessing this is an import perhaps from America, but this is rare because it's the 262C, the coupe, the two-door coupe version by Bertoni. Very low roofline on these cars. Certainly an interesting looking car indeed. I think we saw one of these last at Capesthorne last year. Now, I do like these, the Matra Rancho. Really interesting, useful little car. It looks like a four-wheel drive, but isn't, as far as I remember. Shades of the Disco, the Discovery that came a few years later. But yeah, that's a nice looking car. Back to standards, and we have this two-tone grey pre-war car. This is an Avon bodied car. More than that I don't know, I'm afraid, but I'm guessing mid-1930s or thereabouts. It's got the solid disc wheel covers on it as well, probably by Ace. They produced a lot of those wheel covers. But yeah, nice and rare. And as is this, a 1985 Wartburg. Wow, old two-stroke East German machine. What an interesting old car that is. Still plenty of classic cars to come in this review of this year's restoration show. Back to Morris's FYK 259 now. That's you don't see too many of those now. Morris 8 Series E Tourer. It's great to see it's got the original slopey headlamps. So many of these were converted to Lucas 7-inch seal beam headlamps with little pods that stuck out on the wings, but this is how the Series E's used to look. Bit of work going on now on this Morris Minor FPV 749, the little Moggy 1000 of the late 1950s or beginning of 1960s, I'm not quite sure. FPV 749 is the registration. If you look that up online, you'll find out all the details on that particular car. Now here it looks like a new build, a recreation or replica of the Jaguar C-Type, the alloy-bodied Jaguar C-Type. These saw great success at Le Mans in the early 1950s. The forerunner of the D-Type. Yeah, that'll make for a lovely road car when that one's finished. We've got a scimitar, but not a Reliant scimitar. This is one of the later middle bridge scimitars. That's one of the G-plate. I think we've seen this one last year, but G-plate tells us that this one is about 1989 or 1990. This particular example, but they've got a strong following, as have the earlier Reliant scimitars. Now we've got a Mark I Ford Fiesta in very restored condition, absolutely immaculate. What a beauty that is, even down to the stickers on the tyres. Clearly it doesn't see much road use, because those stickers wouldn't last 5 minutes if you ran it on the road. But yeah, it's a beautifully preserved car. Project Bobcat was the name of that particular car when it was being developed. Okay, back to Volvos, and we've got a 66 Amazon Estate here. I'm guessing this is a 221 or a 221S. The saloons were 121 or 122S, and the estates were 221 or 222S. It's got a police thing on the top as well. Is that an original police car? Anyway, back to the Barn Find exhibition. This one was very eye-catching, really caught my eye. A stunning post-war Jaguar Mark IV. This car is from 1947, and wouldn't that look just magnificent if it was restored? Will it end up being restored, or will it just be used for parts? You'd hope that it would be restored. But definitely restored is this camper van. This is based on the BMC JU250 van. Now, the 250 was the replacement for the J4. We saw the Austin Morris J4 before, the grey van, a few minutes ago, and this was based on the replacement, which was the JU250. Yeah, it's really cool. Back to Saabs. This is a rare thing. The photo's not great, I'm afraid, but this is a 99 EMS. And until the turbo came along, this was the performance car in Saab's range in the 1970s. EMS had the 2-litre engine with fuel injection. And of course later you had the turbo with fuel injection and the turbocharger. Classic Wolseley's now, and this is an 1885 based on the Austin Morris 1800, of course. Bit of badge engineering here. This is on a J plate, a 1970 Wolseley 1885. And as you can see, it's still got the illuminated Wolseley badge in the middle of the rad. They all had that. That's great. Now I do like the big Triumph estates, the saloons and the estates like we see here, but this one was unusual because someone shoehorned the Stag 3-litre V8 engine under its bonnet, so that must be a lot of fun. But yeah, lovely looking cars. I do like the look of these. Mark 1s and Mark 2s had the same rear styling, but the Mark 2s had a different front. Now, classic Triumph here, post-war Triumph. Now, there were 3 cars in all, only one of which was actually called the Renown, but I think generally they all tend to be called the Renown, with the razor edge styling. Sir John Black was the boss of Triumph at the time, and yeah, the big brother to the Mayflower. Now we saw an E28 BMW 5 Series earlier, and this is the forerunner of that car, the E12. This is I think this was a 520. So it's got a small 2-litre straight 6 engine under its bonnet. You can see the twin carburetors. Later cars will be fuel injected, and this is the E12 Series 5 Series on carbs. Over on the Ford side, Valve Club stand, as well as that lovely E83W we saw before, and the 100E Escort Estate, was this great barn find Ford Model Y, a 2-door long rad Ford Model Y 8 horsepower car from about 1933 or 34, thereabouts. Very dusty, recently dragged out of a shed somewhere. Now, APW 300, we're cracking through these old cars nice and quickly now. This is a Triumph Gloria 2-litre Vitesse Tourer, and this particular car, this really eye-catching car, was built in 1936. And as you can tell, Vitesse was a name that was used pre-war as well as on the later Herald-based cars. Another lovely old Volvo, which I've got some association with. I used to run one of these, a 544 and later a 444, but this is a PV 544. Really good cars, these drive so nicely. Still plenty of cars to go. Another crusty looking car here with a bit of moss thrown in for good measure. P-registered Triumph Dolomite Sprint with a 16 valve engine. Clearly a bit of work ahead for someone there, but hopefully it will be restored. Nice one here. We've got a Riley Elf in the foreground. Don't recognise those wheels. And in the background, a mini Clubman estate being worked on. There's an engine lift crane there, so maybe it was an engine out job for the Mini. If you actually helped out on any of the stands that I feature here, please pop a note and say hello in the comments. Now, we've had the brown Morris Ital before, and now we've got a lurid lime green four-door Morris Ital that was parked alongside it. This was sort of the evolution, if you like, the updated version of the Morris Marina, penned by Ital. And here we've got another Land Crab. We saw the Wolseley 1885 a few minutes ago, and this is an Austin or Morris 1800 that's been converted for a bit of historic rallying. Lovely Maxi here from the good old days of British Leyland. This is quite a late example actually, 1980 or early 1981, complete with vinyl roof. You can see the transverse twin carburettor engine there, so this was one of the higher spec ones I would imagine. Those hubcaps look very similar to those on the Allegro. Now, back to the early 1950s, a barn find or barn fresh Jowett Javelin Saloon Boxer 4-cylinder engine under that bonnet. Great things. These, you lift the bonnet up and the grille hinges down. It's a great old thing, this is. Back to East Germany, we've got a Trabant here, much modified Trabant. The two-stroke engine lurking under its body, under the bonnet there. You can see the fuel tank there under the bonnet as well. Now here's a car that's been off the road for many, many years. We have a Hillman Super Minx Estate. I seem to remember, according to the information in the window, it had a bit of a nerf in the front corner many, many years ago. It was stripped down and then the project was never finished. So will this car be restored or will it be used for parts? Who knows. Now here's this Citroen Amy. Now you may remember this one if you saw the Crew Heritage video that I did recently, earlier in this month, March 2023. I had a lengthy chat with the owner of this cracking little car. So if you like your old Citroens, please have a look at that Crew Heritage video once you're finished here, but it's just a really interesting thing. Now we have a mini van, not badged Austin or not badged Morris. These were just mini, I think, by this point in time. This is on a K-plate, so early 1970s, and they would go on to be called the Mini 95 van and pickup. Back to Wolseley's LXS 510, I think is the registration of this one. It's a Wolseley 1248 Series 3. Still quite a few classic cars to come, so if you've made it this far in this look at the Restoration Show for 2023, thanks very much for sticking with me. Over here we've got an Aston Martin DB6 Volante. Volante was the name for all the open top versions of Astons at that time. Very swish looking motor car indeed. There's that MG Y Series saloon, very similar colour alongside it actually. Another car being worked on over the duration of this 3-day show down at the NEC. TJR 176R is a 1976 Reliant Scimitar SE6 Coupe. A 3-litre Ford V6 engine under its fiberglass bonnet. Cracking little Wolseley 1500 here. This was a single carb car. The Riley 1.5 had twin carburetors, was a bit more sporting, but the Wolseley went along very well as well. 1489cc engine. Dad had one the same colour as this and it drove really, really nicely. Rack and pinion steering, very similar to a Morris Minor under the skin. A gaggle of Fiat 126s here. There's one being worked on in the background there, that bright green example, and in the foreground a really original faded red example on an M registration. Again, very neat little car, looks like a lot of fun. This was the replacement for the Fiat 500. Van den Plas, and this one based on the AD016, the Austin and the Morris 1100. This is the Vanden Plas 1300. Can't quite see if that's got the single carb or the twin carbs. The manual cars had the twin carburetors and the autos had the single carb. I've seen this one before, quite a few years ago. It looked very similar to this. I'm guessing this one is being preserved in as-is condition, a Wolseley 680 of the early 1950s. So I'm guessing this one, I haven't checked, but I'm guessing it's about 1952 or thereabouts, maybe a year or two older. But yeah, lovely car, based on the Morris Oxford MO shell. Next up we have a Rover 3.5 litre. This is the P5B Coupe with a lower roofline compared to the P5B Saloon. Which would you prefer, the Saloon or the Coupe? I mean, I used to run a P5B Saloon, and it was a very handsome machine indeed, and half the price of a Coupe. Wow, now I've seen this one advertised before online over quite a long time, I think. But who's going to take this one on? An Austin 3 litre based hearse of all things. What an incredible thing. This is a higher roof. It looks like it's a fiberglass extension on the roof, extending rearwards, and a tailgate at the back. What an incredible car that is. We've seen one of these already, but I couldn't not photograph this one. Another example of the A90 Atlantic drophead coupe. This one was for sale even. So I can imagine that would be a pretty penny to buy. And what a great looking car. And to restore one of those to that condition, if you start off with a rough one, would be a major undertaking. And talking of fairly rough cars and major undertakings, is this Series 3 V12 Jaguar E-Type. Clearly there's a lot of work ahead for someone there. And rather than me, I think. Could be a manual, could be an auto, but most likely an automatic gearbox, I would have thought. Now this was one of the highlights of the NEC Restoration Show this year for me, was this wonderful blue Honda. This is a Honda 1300 Coupe 7 GT, apparently a car that I know almost nothing about, but it was really, really neat to see this. I don't think these were ever sold here in the UK. So this one's been brought in fairly recent, only within the last few months, I believe. And there's a rear three-quarter view of the same car on the Practical Classics magazine stand, and that is just great. What a wild and unusual looking car that is. Quite an advanced car as well, from what I remember. Quite a few lovely old Rileys were there at the NEC this year as well, and we've got a couple of RM saloons here. Over in the auction area again, we've got this really nice Mark II Ford Zephyr. I could be very tempted with one of these one day. Two-tone car with white wall, the clip-on white walls, I think, in this particular case. So this would have had the 6-cylinder engine under its bonnet, and the console was the 4-cylinder, and then the top of the tree was the Zodiac. Now, oh dear, this was a very sorry sight, a Triumph TR3A that's clearly had a very bad time. The front's all mangled, and it looks like it's been left. There's filler falling out of those front wings. Everything's mangled and mashed. Is someone really going to restore this? It would be a mountain of a job to do. Okay, we've got a rat rod here, a Ford 100E, a two-door Ford 100E, preserved as is. Nice beefy wheels on it, lowered slightly. Sun visor, looks like it's been made specially for the car. But yeah, looks like a bit of a giggle, and great to see all these cars being preserved, whether restored or in their original clothes. Now, this was a major project that was on a jig on display this year, a Porsche 356 Coupe. What a job that is. I don't think I could face taking on something like that. But this I could be very tempted with. Now apparently that was the original paint, so it said on the screen, glorious metallic blue Mercury. I think this was, well, looking at the reg plate on the front, the license tag on the front, that says 1949. I'm thinking that's probably about right for this particular car. What a stunning car that is. Look at the chrome on it. And this is a rarity too, a two-tone Alfa Romeo Alfetta from 1983. Alfetta for many years was only ever associated with the racing Alfas of the, well, so about 1950, 51, that kind of era, the Alfa 158 and 159 Alfetta. But it was reused again for the saloons in the early 1980s. Now look at this, YWG 586. That is a 1947 American, it's an international fire truck. What an incredible vehicle that is, great for shows. Still a few more cars to go, and back to the auction area. There's that Morris alongside that we saw way earlier in this video, but here we've got a Ford Model T. That's a 4-seat tourer. By the look of it, of course, you could get various saloons and a coupe as well. And now this is a left-hand drive car, so I'm assuming this was built in America. The Trafford Park cars were right-hand drive. And just again, just to sort of as a reminder of how many stands and club stands actually had work going on cars at the time while the public were walking around. Loads of work going on here, real hive of activity on this Sierra stand. It's always great to see all this work, the effort that goes into putting on these displays is just something else. Over in the for sale area, we've got a cracking little Austin Healey Sprite Mark 1 here, and that lovely pale blue that they did them in. I really like that colour. I think that really suits it. That and the pale green that they are also sold in just look fantastic, I think. Loosely based on the A35 underneath, of course. And the pre-war car here in the sale area, the auction area. There's this really interesting Jowett, a single door Jowett. And there's no door on the driver's side, so you have to shimmy across from the passenger side. In place of a door is this spare wheel on the running board there, and a 2-gallon petrol can as well. This was in the auction area as well. We had the Hillman Minx Super Minx Estate earlier, the slightly mangled one. Here we've got a convertible, 2-door convertible version of the Hillman Super Minx. With a very dismantled car here. This is a Ford Consul Capri, the 2-door Capri Coupe. That's quite a cool car. I'm guessing about 1961 or 62 thereabouts. Clearly being restored, but it doesn't look like a bad starting point. Looks very original, all those inner wings. And there are quite a few of these now popping up at classic car events, and in this case in the auction area, the 4x4 version of the Fiat Panda. This is a left-hand drive car. But these have got quite a following by all accounts now. As have Jaguars, of course. They always have been popular, and hopefully they always will be. This is a 3.4 litre Jaguar S-Type. Bit of a project there, bit of tin worm and filler falling out around the indicator there at the bottom of the front wing. They always tended to rot there and behind the front wheels and so on. But yeah, that'll make for a lovely car when it's done. As will this old Jaguar. Again, this is a 2.8 litre version of the Series 1 XJ6. The 2.8 litre engine sits much lower. It's a much lower engine compared to the 4.2. The 4.2's cam covers are much closer to those two stays under the bonnet there that you can see in this particular photo. And someone's fitted a leaper on the bonnet as well. Okay, now we've got a Triumph TR7. We saw that TR7 Pacer earlier in this particular video, and here we've got a standard fixed head coupe with that groovy checker interior, that interior trim that was so memorable of the brochures. Flicking through the brochures, I remember picking those up when I was a kid from the local BL garage. Now we have an MGB Roadster, rally prepared MGB Roadster. Clearly this has got quite a history, looking at all the signs down the side there. But yeah, very modified vehicle indeed. Look at that cowcatcher on the front there. You don't see that on a typical MGB. And that really lovely MGB rounds out this little view, little look back at the NEC Restoration Show with Practical Classics and Discovery Plus for 2023. I hope that was of interest, and apologies if I didn't feature your car, if it was also on display there this year. I just couldn't feature every particular car. Like I say, I could have done a walk around video, but I wasn't quite sure if that was going to work too well, so I thought this way I can focus just on the cars that I wanted to talk about, and also dig up a little bit of history on some of the cars away from the show afterwards. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please check out some of the other show videos, reviews, museum visits and so on the channel. There'll be more videos along before very long, so thanks for now. Bye bye.